Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4. 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 How do we sound in the mayor's office? Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah?
Yeah, well, because it so much fun. Yeah. Did you ever think about going back to
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So right here is good. Yeah, all right.
All right, so we're just waiting for a few people to get here. Obviously, once we go to the Q&A, we have different groups. I'm here to go to the ID field, the question lot. And also, while there's a lot going on, still active up in Maine, we can go into details of what we're doing, and obviously not cheap on to the it's not the exact timeline, but we're doing communication with them. Any questions that people have, that we will obviously take them, but we have to walk the front line. It's not our investigation. Well, we don't know what the fact is that. We have to do it. We have to do it. Yeah. So Rebecca will come. I don't know, we have to have, we'll talk about, falling a leaf now for, but, the Cooper Union thing, is really, was straight up, and we learned of the details that happened there. There wasn't much, going on, we were there the entire time. Yeah, I mean, that's gonna, I don't know what we're gonna be able to do to, it's just, people gonna feel unsafe at that right now. It's hard to watch everything that's going on around, and this thing doesn't mean like help people feel unsafe. But, yeah, Q&A will be, some of it will be at the front, some of it will have to,
How was this trip to Qatar? How was this trip to Qatar? Did you do like an after action report?
all of those trips, I think you see the importance of them now. You got to have relationships like these places. Relationships, how it was.
All right, last mic check. Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check, 1, 2, 3, 4. How we sound? Good? Mayor's office, we're good? Yep.
Good morning, Mayor Adams, joined by the administration, the team leaders. We had a series of things that took place overnight, during the evening, and early this morning, and we believe that during these times where there's a high level of tension in the city, we want to be as upfront and as informed as possible to the public, to keep them knowledgeable of what is unfolding and what is taking place. And so today, the police commissioner and the deputy mayor Banks and I are coming to just give you some brief updates. One, on a 7-year-old child we lost today due to a vehicle crash. The chief of department, Chief Madry is going to give us an update on that. He was at the scene, and he's going to give us an update on that. The second is an incident that took place at one of our local colleges here in the city. Chief Shell will give a complete overview on what took place there as well. And lastly, Commissioner Rebecca Weiner is going to give an update on what we have dealing with the shooting that took place in Maine. And we're going to give an overview on what we're doing as a city. As we know, the person is still at large, and our hearts go out not only to the victims in Maine, but we also lifted up the family of the 7-year-old child that we lost here due to a vehicle crash in Brooklyn. That was my old precinct, the 88th precinct. I know the area very well, and no parent wants to start their day losing a loved one to any form of incident. So it is heart-wrenching for all of us. We all feel it, and we thought it was just important as these three issues play out, and the current issue that's still playing out in Maine. We wanted to give a complete update. The commissioner and I, we have a line of duty funeral to attend. After the commissioner does his briefing, we'll turn it over to the administration, the personnel, NYPD, to give the final and answer any questions that you may have. Commissioner?
Okay, good morning, everyone. And as the mayor said, first let me say my heart goes out to the entire community of Lewiston, Maine. Those folks are going through a tough time right now, and the thoughts and prayers of the entire NYPD are with them. So we all know this is a great deal of tension and conflict in the world this time. So when we hear about an act of violence of this magnitude, you begin to wonder what motivation might be. And for everyone sitting up here, we also have to ask another question right away. Is there any connection to New York City? And while this is not our investigation, and answers to these questions are never immediately known, that doesn't mean we have the luxury of waiting for those answers. As law enforcement officials in Maine began flooding the area and working the case, we kept close watch here. My team, along with City Hall, had multiple conference calls to share information. As more details began to emerge and the sheer magnitude of the violence became clear, we made the decision to start marshaling our resources. Granted, there was no specific credible threat to New York City, but to me, we could not remain idle. Our mission is to always protect New Yorkers, and that is exactly what we were going to do. Once a video of the suspect emerged, it wasn't long before authorities identified a person of interest. We took that person's image and sent out an alert to every smartphone in our department. We also made the decision to dispatch investigators to Lewistown, both to gather information as quickly as possible and to offer any support in any way we could. Lewiston is approximately 5 hours away from New York City by car. So with each passing hour, we also had our duty to ensure we had appropriate resources at the ready should the suspect somehow turn up here. I'll tell you right now, I'm extremely proud of our officers who immediately jumped into action, putting a plan in place in such short notice. New Yorkers need to know the NYPD always stands at the ready to protect them and keep our city safe. We will never remain idle when there is a possible threat looming over us, and that is exactly what we demonstrated last night. as this case continues to unfold and the search intensifies for the suspect, you can count on the NYPD to remain vigilant and ready to do our part. Thank you very much.
And as the Commissioner and I leave, we and Chief Shell, please update the number of protests and rallies we've had over the last few days. And I cannot really thank the men and women of the New York City Police Department for the job of allowing people to peacefully protest and at the same time maintaining order and discipline. And Chief Shell will go over the number of protests and rallies that took place, but the men and women of the police department, even some of the protests took place in close proximity of each other, but they maintained the level of professionalism that we expect from the New York City Police Department. So I really want to thank them over these last few difficult days, and there are more difficult days ahead of us, but the men and women of the police department really responded appropriately, and job well done as we continue to ensure that the people of the city are safe to go about carrying out their daily functions. Again, I'll turn it over to Chief of Department Mantry. Commissioner, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Commissioner. Good morning to members of the media. As our heart goes out and our prayers go out for the families and the communities of Lewiston, Maine, right now my heart and my prayers are going out to the community of Clinton Hills and the Fort Greene, Ingersoll, Whitman section. As this morning, I made it to the scene where we lost a young 7-year-old. At approximately 10-minute state, about 7:50 in the morning, one of our department tow trucks with a tow on the hitch was traveling westbound on Myrtle Avenue in the downtown Brooklyn area, Clinton Hills area. The tow truck, as it was proceeding westbound, arrives at the intersection of Myrtle Avenue and North Portland Avenue, attempting to make a right-hand turn to go northbound on North Portland Avenue. Simultaneously, a young mother and a 7-year-old son were walking on the sidewalk of Myrtle Avenue at the intersection of North Portland Avenue, attempting to cross the street going westbound on North Portland Avenue. As the department tow truck made the right-hand turn and started to pass the crosswalk, the young child who was walking with his mother was struck. The child went down. The tow truck operator stopped immediately. EMS arrived to the scene and immediately pronounced the young child DOA on the scene. Right now, it's an active investigation. The collision investigation squad is on the scene, and as it is a very new investigation, the details are limited, and we'll provide an update when we can. But again, my heart goes out to the family of that young boy and his mother and his school, his teachers who were also on the scene. A very tough scene to be at this morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Just in regards to Cooper Unius, I want to get a couple of key facts before I give you a quick timeline. We were aware of the walkout protest rally at the school yesterday. School officials asked us to be there. Our police were there from start to finish. The school asked us if we would be in plain clothes, and that's a protocol that we're going to change and talk to all the schools citywide about that protocol. There was no direct threats, there was no damage, and there was no danger to any students in that school. Like I said, our cops there all day, from start to finish. They were with the 20 protesters that were in the school. They were there at the library. The library doors, the students were not barricaded. The doors were open but closed. A school administrator thought it was prudent to close the doors and place private security as the protesters were coming down the stairs. So at approximately 1 o'clock, the protest started in front of Cooper Union. It was a walkout of students, roughly 70 pro-Palestine, about 20 Israeli students. If you can imagine, parallel to each other. The Palestinian students were chanting. The Israeli students were silent. This went on for a couple hours, but what happened was people who were passing by the school, community people, were getting upset with that protest, and it was starting to get agitated from that point of view. Around 3:30, approximately 20 of the 70 protesters from the Palestinian side went into the school. Now they're supposed to scan in. They are students. Let's be clear. All the people here were all students, part of this institution. As the 20 kids went into the school, they're supposed to swipe in, but they kind of just rushed past the swipe. An administrative error that the school is going to deal with today from school officials. From there, the 20 students want to go up to the president's office, which they did. They got inside the office, the waiting area, if you will, and they were chanting. School officials at that time, with the police on the scene and private security, felt safe, and they wanted to allow the students to keep talking. That happened. It was going on for about a half hour. When the 20 protesters came down the stairs of Cooper Union, another school official heard them coming down, and that person made a decision to let's close the library doors. We'll put one over private security, and let the protesters pass. For about roughly 10 minutes, approximately 10 minutes, they were banging on the doors of the library and banging on some transparent windows that you can see into the library. From that point, the protesters left. School officials thought it was important to ask the Israeli students, do you need help getting home? Any Uber? Do you want an Uber ride? They said, no, we feel safe, we're good, and they all left. We converged on the school last night. We had this full discussion with school officials last night. We walked through the whole timeline, and we asked them what they need today. So today there'll be a uniform presence outside that school, because again, these kids are all students who go to school, and some share the same classes. So we'll be there to make sure everything goes peaceful today. And that's where we stand right now with Cooper Union.
Deputy Commissioner Weiner on the situation in Maine.
Good morning, everybody. And again, our hearts go out absolutely to everyone who was affected by the incident in Maine last night. And we will give you a brief update on what we as NYPD have been doing in coordination with our partners. But just to underline, this is not an NYPD investigation. It's an investigation that's being led by federal, state, and local partners up in Maine, with whom we've been in continuous and extensive contact since the incident occurred, starting just before 7 p.m. yesterday evening. An individual, a person of interest who's been identified as Robert Card, allegedly entered 2 locations, a restaurant, bar, and a bowling alley, and opened fire on all of the innocent people who were inside the location. And like we've seen way too many times, the results were devastating. Our thoughts and prayers remain with the folks of Lewiston. The individual persons of interest photo was made available yesterday evening. He is currently not in police custody. The hunt is ongoing and very dynamic. We are quite confident at this point that this horrific crime has no nexus to New York City. We can't speculate, obviously, as to any motivation, but we don't see any indications at this moment, again, from our perspective here in New York, of any political or ideological leaning. But what we can say is through extensive information sharing with other agencies, NYPD has worked through the knife to make sure that New York City remains safe. And immediately after he was first identified by authorities in Maine, his photograph and all of the identifying information that we had was distributed widely to officers across the city. We've also adjusted our resource deployments, and Chief Shell can speak to these as well, to provide additional touch points, security and observation points at places of entry into the city since yesterday evening. And as is our standard operating practice, whenever an incident like this happens, whether it's overseas or here, across the country, we coordinate extensively with local law enforcement, with federal law enforcement on the ground to make sure of 2 things. 1, that we have the most up-to-date information, and 2, that we can support the ongoing investigation if and however we can as needed. So we ask the proverbial New York question: does this have any impact to New York? And do we have anything in our holdings that could enhance or support the investigation? We do this via an information sharing network called Operation Sentry that's been established for over a decade, that includes several hundred law enforcement agencies across the country. And we're extremely grateful to federal, state, and local law enforcement partners via Operation Sentry in Maine and the broader Northeast, who have been in real time, as they have been dealing with this investigation and manhunt, sharing critical information with us to make sure that we can protect New York City. And I do want to reiterate We don't see any nexus to New York City with this incident, tragic as it was. But we've been saying this a lot over the last couple of weeks, and we always do. We urge all New Yorkers to continue to go about your business, but to remain alert to your surroundings. And we've been saying this for a while now. If you see anything concerning, please don't hesitate. Please reach out. You can call 911, you can call a police officer, or our counterterrorism hotline, which is 1-888 New York City Safe. Thanks.
Chief Shell, talk about a deployment right there.
All right, so last night, late night hours, the executive staff of the police department and the city hall are planning a strategy as to what we could do to mitigate any chances of this individual coming down to New York City. The first thing, we activated our JOC, which is right behind you, to make sure they're in touch with all city agencies, Amtrak, Port Authority, MTA. We put out what we call critical messages to every cop, every uniformed person in the city, with the literature we had about picture and the Subaru he was driving. We had an alert on that car. LPR cars were deployed on every city crossing into the city last night, and it continues this morning. Even though that car has been recovered, we're still standing with that posture. Right now, we have a level 4 activation going on in New York City. That's over 900 cops mobilized. We split the city into 2 parts, and those police officers will be deployed to high sensitive locations throughout the day. This is an abundance of caution we're doing this. Our aviation units will be staggered today throughout the day as to keep a continuous flight up to make sure if anything happens, we're ready to go. Again, this is cautionary. As the Deputy Commissioner mentioned, no direct threat to New York City, but everything always comes back to New York City one way fear, or actually comes back. So this is what we did last night. We're going to stay in this posture all day, and we'll watch the news and get updates from Maine as we go. Okay.
All right, we'll take a few questions on all 3 incidents that was updated. All right, David.
I wanted to ask about the child that was killed in Brooklyn. I don't know, I'm not as familiar with NYPD tow truck drivers, but are there in-car dash cams or any indication that the driver was distracted at all, or I guess any more information from preliminary?
That this incident, thank you for your question first and foremost. This incident is very new, so our collision investigation squads, detectives, they're going through all the protocols. You know, our tow truck operators are civilian operators, civilian members of the service, so that's going to be all part of the investigation. Cameras, witness accounts, and inspecting, of course, the inside of our tow vehicles and seeing what it was equipped with. No, they actually had to tow a vehicle on the hitch, so it was towing a car with, headed in the direction of the Brooklyn tow pound.
All right, so this protest, let me just give you a quick update before I get to that question. We've had roughly 110 protests over the last 19 days, encompassing roughly 70,000 rallies, protesters. We've effected 233 arrests. 225 of those arrests approximately were summonses for being in the street or acts of disobedience. We spoke with CUNY schools last week about our protocols, what we're doing and how we're doing it. If you recall, about 10 days ago at Columbia, we had a great meeting with Columbia. They didn't want us on the campus. We met with them. We said what we were going to do, and it worked out well. So the schools were on board with us. We'll be in uniform with all the schools. It's a protocol we're going to change today in response to Cooper Union yesterday, so we'll do that. But we've met with the schools. All the schools have been cooperative, and we're going to continue to do what we've been doing. When there is a protest at a school, we have resources on site, we have resources off site, and we were working well with the schools, so we're going to continue to do that. Right, so we have locations designated by each patrol borough, schools, high sensitive locations where there are cops are already there. So for instance, last night in Manhattan South, we had cops at CUNY schools, even though there wasn't a protest. So we are doing that.
Yeah, and this is, again, part of what we often will do when there's a significant incident. We can support investigation with resources that we have back here, and we do that habitually. And we can support the investigation up in the field, and that's a good way to make sure that we're understanding everything in as close to real time as possible. There are a number of law enforcement agencies that have surged to Maine since the incident took place, both federal, state, and local. So NYPD is part of a larger team of regional partners that are there just to help out as this manhunt is underway. All of that, those kinds of investigative steps are the reason that we would surge folks to the area. We have no indications of any family members in our AOR right now, our area of responsibility. But again, this is usually a collective effort when it's a high priority investigation like this involving an area that is relatively rural. So there's a number of law enforcement agents who are there on the ground that can help wherever the investigation leads us. But again, we see no indication of any nexus to New York City at all.
We don't have that information at this time.